Hi, all, welcome to the series of lectures in psychology. In this session, we shall discuss the topic motivation and the content of this chapter in motivation is more about how our body physiologically and psychologically is so designed that it realizes the motivation from inside due to various biochemical changes that we experience, that we undergo, that the body undergoes due to the concerted and collaborative effort of the various sensitive parts of the body like brain, the neural networks, the various parts, crucial parts of the brain like hypothalamus, pituitary gland, and the secretion of various hormones. How all these dynamics, the bodily dynamics, result in various neuro biochemical developments that result in realization of certain very fundamental um, needs of the body, namely hunger, thirst, etc., which prompt us, which drive us, which push us, or which motivate us to reach out to the source of food or water accordingly. So that's the backdrop in which we shall be discussing the topic motivation, which will go a bit of deep analysis, deep observation of bodily dynamics and the design of the body functionality that explains the motivation, realization of motivation from inside, and prompting us to reach out to the required action. Okay, so that's the fundamental quality, fundamental characteristic, extremely sophisticated, extremely crucial characteristic of the human body is what we know as homeostasis. Those who have read biology in standard 7, 8, or 9 must be familiar with this terminology called homeostasis. What do you mean by this? You must have realized that a quick change in temperature of brain by several degrees would make a person unconscious, right? If the proportion of water in the body rose or fell by a few percent, the brain and body could not function, and that would in fact risk the person to death. So these are certain fundamental changes in the vital parameters of the body functionality, like the pressure in the blood, or the water content in the body, or temperature. These are certain vital the salt, concentration of salts in the blood. These are certain vital components of the body, which if vary from the normal state to a deviant state, that could result in some kind of deformity or some kind of disorder, or a disease, right? So the inherent, what is homeostasis, what is it doing here? To keep our internal world, that is the body, internally the body, within the narrow limits of these physiological requirements like blood pressure, or the pH levels, the water levels, the salt concentrations, the pressure, temperature, all these physiological components. We have this active control process to maintain the balance among the various vital requirements of the body. And this balance, the act of maintaining the balance in these vital parameters, is called as homeostasis. Homeostasis is a constant internal state. It's a process that drives a system to work to maintain a constant state, preventing you from falling apart. Homeostatic control, processes can be either psychological or physiological or mechanical. In fact, you can draw an interesting comparability or a parallel between body homeostasis and the similar mechanism that works in your domestic utilities, like an air condition, or like a room heater, or a geyser. All these things are are fitted with a self-controlled mechanism, a self-controllable controlling component called thermostat. Say, for instance, you want your air conditioner to attain certain set temperature beyond which you don't want it to go, or you want your geyser to attain certain temperature to boil the water and don't go beyond. So in order to set that point, in order to make the machine reach at a set point and gain stability there, you have to implant, the machine is implanted with something called thermostat. A similar mechanism has been implanted in human body, wherein there are set points for body pressure, set point for body temperature, the body fluids, the salts, the pH level, water, etc. Right? And body has an automatic mechanism to realize either the deficit or surplus of any of these vital indicators, and it has a mechanism to respond, to communicate, to send signals, to release the corresponding hormones, and to send signal to the brain, prompting the brain to secrete the corresponding hormone and communicating it to the concerned part of the body that, you know, there is a possibility of imbalance. Imbalance could be due to shortage of water, shortage of salt, shortage of, or rise in temperature or rise in pressure, and prompting the individual to reach out to a counter mechanism to bring the body back to the stability. This setting up of the set point, responding to realizing the change and responding to the change and prompting the individual to get into the required action is called homeostasis, right? So the homeostatic control system, both physiological and psychological, are the reason for this constancy. Say, for instance, when you are when you are uh, in high temperature condition, the body has a natural mechanism to sweat, right? We discharge a lot of sweat. The sweat is the mechanism of homeostasis, which makes us realize that you are in too much of heat and you need to reach out to a colder place. Likewise, when you are in extremely lesser temperatures, the body has the natural mechanism to shiver, and shivering is the body's response system. Again, an incidence of homeostasis where you are made to realize that you are in extremely cold temperatures. You need to reach out to a more protected place that can keep you safe. And all this is because of the neural thermostats. Neural thermostats. Neurons are, in fact, it's all, as we discussed, it's all a bundle of neurons. Human body is all about a bundle of neurons. Neurons at several sites in the brain, especially within the front region of hypothalamus, as you see in the image. At the base of brain, there is a bundle of neural thermostats. Neural thermostats, which is essentially responsible for this entire signaling system, receiving and sending across the responses to the brain, prompting the brain to release the required signal systems by way of secreting the neurotransmitters or hormones, resulting in the stimulation of the response system, like shivering or sweating or thirst, etc. So that was homeostasis, the balancing mechanism of the human body in response to the short deficit or sometimes surplus of the required components in the human body. Okay, so that's okay. So that was a great deal of discussion on homeostasis. So if you look at the definition of it, homeostasis is the body's ability to maintain a state of balance by monitoring and maintaining internal states. What are these internal states we're referring to? Such as temperature, blood sugar, weight, at fairly constant levels. The body has set points for a variety of states. including all those components that we had just stated above, namely temperature, blood sugar. Each one has an optimum level. What is optimum level? Optimum level is where it is ideally expected to be according to the height, the of a person, the age of the person. Every individual has an optimal level of temperature he should possess, he or she should possess, weight he or she should possess, and any amount of deviation from the set point is a call for the homeostatic mechanism to bring it back to a normal level. Okay. Right. We can answer the questions before we move on to the next part of the discussion. Okay. So this is where we will see as to how thirst can be understood as a homeostatic process. We have seen how cold is responded to by homeostasis, how heat, temperature is responded to by homeostasis. We take a little deeper dive into understanding. If we take thirst as an indicator how homeostasis works, let's look at the process steps of how the body responds to a state of experience when an individual is experiencing thirst, and what prompts him or her to reach out to the source of water, right? So broadly, as it is explained, thirst, the realization of thirst can happen from two sources. As we explain on this slide, the first source of realization can be called as extracellular thirst, and quite predictably, the second source of realization of thirst is referred to as intracellular thirst. We will look at intracellular after this discussion. Now, on this slide, we try to understand what are the various process steps that finally result in realization or it arouses the desire to drink water. Okay, so as it goes, so extracellular thirst, just to give a quick explanation, is when the thirst arises, or the realization of thirst happens due to a condition outside the cells of human body. And again, predictably, intracellular thirst is a condition which arises a deficit of water due to a condition inside the cells of human body. That's the difference between extracellular and intracellular. So there's a bit of difference in mechanism because the location of realization is different. One is outside the cell environment and the other is inside the cell environment. So there is a bit of difference in the mechanism, the process steps, which we shall quickly take a look into. So as it suggests, extracellular thirst, if you look at the process steps as indicated by the arrows, we start with the water is extracted from the body. As a first, the water is first step. Water is extracted from the body by what? By the kidneys. And how is the extraction of water happening from the body? By the kidneys. How do they perform? Water is extracted from the body by the kidneys in the form of urine, sweat, breathe vapor. When you are breathing out, you're essentially breathing out water in form of vapor. So urine, sweat, breathe out. In such case, in each of these cases, it comes most directly from the blood supply, right? And that results in this. So the loss reduces the volume of extracellular fluid that remains. In turn, the loss of blood volume reduces a reduction in blood pressure. It produces so blood pressure falls to a lower level, right? Pressure receptors relay a signal. As a result, the pressure receptors would relay a signal to the brain with the help so when the pressure receptors relay due to the changes in the pressure levels, due to the changes in the fluid levels reducing, the pressure levels dropping in the blood, the pressure receptors relay the signal See, look at there's something, there is a development, the water is reducing, pressure is falling, and hence the pressure receptors relay the signal to the blood. And how does it happen? The neurons send signal to the pituitary gland, which is situated in the hypothalamus location of the brain. It uh, it uh, releases it releases the pituitary gland releases this hormone called antidiuretic hormone, ADH, antidiuretic hormone, into the bloodstream, right? So the pressure receptors relay the signal to the brain, and the neurons send signal to, so from the brain, the neurons in the brain send signal to the pituitary gland, which is again in the brain in the hypothalamus location. Pituitary gland in turn releases this hormone called antidiuretic hormone right into the bloodstream. And ADH, or antidiuretic hormone, causes the kidneys to retain water from the blood as they filter it, and as a result kidneys deliver it back to the blood. So instead of discharging, when your body is falling short of water, instead of discharging the remaining water in the body through urine, the kidney realizes that the body is suffering from shortage of water, so let me not discharge it as urine, let me send it back to the water requirement of the body into the blood. And the brain signals, as a result the brain signals the kidneys release. But then how long will it function with that water? It anyway, some point of time it has to discharge. So meanwhile, what it does, the brain signals the kidneys, and kidneys release this another hormone called renin. Renin in turn causes a release of another hormone called angiotensin, and angiotensin is finally the hormone that induces the deep desire to drink water. So those are the process steps that explains the entire process of how one experiences the feel of thirst, and how the condition of deficit of water is realized, responded to, managed, and is prompted to the brain, to the individual, finally prompting him or her to reach out to the water source. So that was extracellular thirst, and that takes us to the intracellular thirst, which is caused by this mechanism called osmosis. Now, what is osmosis? Osmosis is the tendency of water to move from the zones of abundance to the zones of scarcity. Osmosis is this characteristic of water to move from the plentiness to scarcity, right? So as the body loses the water, these concentrations, the salt concentrations, begin to rise in the bloodstream. So body loses the water, resulting in the rise in the concentration of salts in the bloodstream. In a sense, the blood becomes saltier. The higher concentrations within the blood cause water to migrate from relatively dilute insides of the body cells, including neurons, towards the blood. Water in the cells migrates from dilute insides of body cells towards the blood. And as a result, what is happening in the third box, the water is pulled out of the neurons and other cells. As a result of this osmotic pressure, water is pulled out of the neurons and other cells, right? As a result, what's happening in the fourth box, neurons within hypothalamus become activated. Neuron is the central point of the entire the stimulus response mechanism. Wherever there is a stimulus which needs attention, which needs to be responded to, the point of messengering, the activity of messengering between the stimulus and the corresponding part to respond to is done by the neural bundles. If you observe, neurons within the hypothalamus become activated, and as a result, so these active neurons, the cells and neurons become dehydrated, and this produces what we call as osmotic or intracellular thirst, producing the desire to drink. So why do we discuss these two? We in the context of motivation. What motivates us to drink water can be biologically, biochemically, we can explain as to how the body is so designed that it realizes the shortage of the necessary fluids in the body, and which motivates us to reach out to uh, to replenish the replenish the components that are falling short, and hence in this case it was water, as we discussed the case of thirst in depth. Okay, so that should explain how motivation operates in a human body. Okay, before we move on to the next part of the discussion, you can answer the questions and then move on. Okay, so what keeps us motivated? As you can see, the pictures, motivation typically directs behavior of an individual. It could be human or it could be a dog, as you see. Typically directs the behavior towards a particular incentive that produces pleasure, or that alleviates or that reduces the unpleasant state, right? We are constantly, if you observe your various deeds, various efforts, you are either engaged in the process of reducing the displeasure or enhancing the pleasure, right? So that's how and we are in this constant loop of uh, the wants and likes. How would you differentiate wants and likes? Before which, so the term motivation refers to the entire range of consciously experienced pleasure and displeasure. Okay, so want, how do you understand want? As you see, the want results in liking, liking results in wanting. But how do you understand wanting? When you want something, you're actually in anticipation of pleasure. You haven't had it yet, but you are in anticipation of pleasure. As in the cravings that you experience when you think ahead to a delicious meal. You haven't had the meal yet, you're here to have it, but you're already visualizing, you are imagining, and you are already developing the innate want or desire to satiate your desire, right? Whereas liking, which is released, which happens due to the release of the hormone called opioid. As it was dopamine in case of wanting, it is opioid in case of liking. Liking, by contrast, as against wanting, is a pleasure that you experience in the moment that you begin to eat that particular meal. And when you like it, it might result in more wanting, which might again result in liking. So it's a loop of liking and wanting that we find ourselves in this drive of motivation, and, of liking things, of enhancing pleasure or reducing the displeasure. Okay, so that takes us into a not so a very happy discussion about how we get motivated into in the wrong direction of drug abuse. You know, we I'm sure we have an opinion, we have heard, we have read, we have seen, we have watched a lot about drugs and their impact upon the human body. You know, it's an addiction, it leads to addiction. And how do you see addiction? How can we explain addiction as a reward? Addiction, how do you understand it? How do you define addiction? Is a powerful motivation for some people. The craving for certain drugs, such as heroin, morphine, or or various other cocaine, etc. They sometimes they become, when somebody is in continuous abuse of these substance, it can become overwhelming, it can become daunting, it can become an addiction. Some drugs are especially powerful in their ability to produce addiction. How do they cause this addiction? There are three major factors that operate the drug abuse, pulling the person towards addiction. How? The first one is the ability of most of these drugs to overactivate incentive systems in the brain. You know, they can produce levels of activity in the dopamine system. We have a natural secretion of dopamine, but then these kind of drugs, they overactivate the incentive systems, and they might end up producing more dopamine than we are naturally designed to, than a human body is naturally designed to secrete, right? More dopamine, more pleasure, more pleasure, more wanting, more wanting, more liking, more liking, more liking, more wanting, and hence the frequency increases, the um, the quantity increases, leading an individual to addiction, right? Second factor, that is the ability of these drugs to produce unpleasant withdrawal symptoms. That is, when you give a when somebody when the addict gives gap in consumption, it shows very unpleasant withdrawal symptoms, which prompt the individual to abuse a drug again. As a drug is taken again and again, the pleasure systems that it activates may become increasingly resistant to activation. You know, and which might prompt the withdrawal symptoms may be really painful. It may not allow the individual to stay away from the drugs for a very long period of time. They become virtually inactive, non-participative. They become very docile, and so these withdrawal symptoms, this is what you refer to as withdrawal symptoms, and withdrawal symptoms may not be very healthy, and they may motivate, they may prompt, they may push the individual to go back to the drug abuse, and as they feel, and they start feeling better with the abuse. And third one, when you see as they take this drug again and again, the body system gets acquainted with the drug inducing, they become used to it, and they develop, the neural system develops a resistance to activation in an effort to regain the normal balance state. This is what is referred to as tolerance. Now, the drug tolerance mechanism enhances or it induces the need for a greater amount of drug. As an individual is in the habit of taking drug over a period of time, the same dose of drug may not give the individual the kick or the high that one, or the euphoria that one is expecting, which prompts the individual to go for a greater amount of drug, resulting in what you call a euphoric state called neural sensitization, right? All these are leading in some or the other way overactivating the incentive systems, or neural or the withdrawal symptoms, withdrawal syndromes, or inducing the drug tolerance, resulting in neural sensitization, prompting the person to go for more of it, and become an addict, right? And which is why they say the relapse, relapse. What do you mean by relapse? Relapse is when a drug addict has undergone a de-addiction counseling program, but then it has been observed that 40 to 60% of these people who have said no to drugs, who have undergone a methodical de-addiction counseling program, a proper training, are prone to come back to the drug abuse because of these characteristics of the drugs, because of the withdrawal symptoms, because of the need for that euphoric state. It's been observed. It acts as a motivator for abusing drugs, Hence, something that needs to be worried about, needs to be cautioned about, careful about. Okay, before we move on, those questions can be answered. Eating is another factor that results in a lot of health scare, health disorders, and these tendencies of eating are what you refer to as the binge eating. You know, eating a binge eating where we see individuals harping upon eating continuously, constantly, beyond the capacity, beyond the requirement, beyond the need of the body. When we indulge in eating, it results in binge eating, and it has its own adversities. And those are the tendencies which are taken advantage of by the beverage companies, the fast food snack companies, you know, which prompt the food, the not so great food in such beautiful packages, which prompt you, which induce you, which motivate you, which drive you to fall into a binge eating practice, right? Eating is, in fact, it's much more complex than drinking. When we are thirsty, we generally need only water, and our thirst is directed towards anything they'll provide. But when it is eating, you have more choices, you have more options, and what will you fall upon will determine what is the consequence of your eating, right? We need to select the proper balance of foods that contain the fundamental building blocks of a nutritional food, namely proteins, carbohydrates, fats, minerals, vitamins, etc. But instead, our options usually are different, deviant than those, isn't it? Okay, so uh, what makes us so addictive? This has been somewhere related to, you know, classical conditioning. I'm sure you are familiar with the expression classical conditioning, the experiments between the dog and the food conducted by Ivan Pavlov, classical conditioning. And the theory of classical conditioning has been related to a person's affinity, indulgence in eating, um, you know, the experience with nourishing consequences of food leads to gradual liking for its taste through a process that is essentially classical conditioning. And developing, this is how we develop preferences for tastes, which we tend to like. Sometimes we may as well developing preferences for tastes that are not initially pleasant, but then we get used to those, and uh, we end up consuming more frequently, like alcohol or coffee, right? So to say, they are not very taste on the face of it, but then, you know, we develop a liking, we develop gradually, we develop an addiction, a conditioned addiction towards these beverages. Whereas some people, you know, they may not like, uh, not everybody may like what we consume. For instance, the alcohol consumption of alcohol, or for instance tea or coffee, may not go well with everybody. And we associate our first consumption, the expression of our first consumption, with the taste of that food, and we might develop an aversion towards that particular food which we didn't like in the first time, and hence we may not want to eat it further. And this is what is referred to as conditioned aversion. Okay. Hunger. Now we had discussed briefly about thirst in process steps. How do you see hunger uh, being a homeostatic mechanism? Uh, like you see hunger. Why does body need to make you realize that it is hungry? Because body needs to live, body needs to drive, body needs to perform functions, body needs to metabolize, body needs to walk, sit, think, run. And for all these things you need energy. And where do you get energy from? You need energy from You get energy from the process of metabolism. And what do you metabolize primarily? While there are so many things being metabolized, but primary component of metabolism is sugar. And what do you do with the sugar? How does sugar develop? Sugar is the output of the process steps of digestion. Your ingestion, egestion, digestion, excretion. So your before which your the sugar is the output of digestion process. And what do you digest? You digest what you eat, the food. And why do you eat? Because the body has induced this feeling called hunger, which results in the body requirement, right? So that's how we understand that body needs to induce hunger because it needs to meet its energy requirements through metabolism by producing sugar through digestion of the food that we eat because we feel hungry, right? So that was quick understanding of hunger as a instrument of homeostasis to gain energy. Okay, before we move in, please answer the question. Okay, and so hunger, when not managed well, when we go into overeating or wrong eating, wrong time eating, wrong content eating, it might result in what none of us would want to experience, that is overweighing. If you look at those stats, the comparison between 2015 and 2021, that's not a very happy scenario. The rise in the obesity levels is on the rise, right? While you see it was 20% over Indians in 2015, and now you see 24% of Indians are above the obesity, above the weight that is desired of them. And what causes obesity? One of the causes, of course, binge eating. And what causes binge eating? As you see, some of the popular observations, what causes binge eating is childhood trauma. Childhood trauma, some of the undesirable experiences of childhood might put a person as a repression mechanism, as a suppression mechanism. One might find oneself into overeating just to keep oneself away from the memories of trauma, or frequent restrictive dieting. Dieting is a new in thing. We call many fancy terminologies, like you have intermittent fasting, or fluid diet, liquid diet, or all sort of non fancy terminologies have come in the name of dieting. And what do we do when we are dieting? We are starving, and when we are starving, we are developing cravings. When we are developing cravings, we are waiting for the time moment when the dieting is over, and the moment the dieting schedule is over, we binge, we jump into the food, and we eat more than what we probably would have if we were not into such restrictive dieting. Another reason could be, of course, depression or anxiety disorders, or substance abuse might put you into more eating than what the body needs. Genetically, we may have, biologically or genetically, we may have inherited some such genes, or which they refer to as the fat cells, which are by nature designed to consume more than what we would need. There are some examples where you see a child is obese, and it's quite likely that the father is also obese, granddad is also obese. And if that is the case, not necessarily that it happens across all the families, but when such is the case, it is an evident fact that the obesity in such cases is by the genealogy, the genetic inheritance, than any other reason. Or the history of weight stigma. Weight is considered a stigma in the society. That's a socio-cultural challenge where we face such challenges like body shaming, or calling names, ugly names for people with more weight, which might force the people into diet, and hence again binge eating, as we discussed. Okay, so dieting and the set points. What is a set point? Set point is how the drugs related to the dieting help in dieting. That's again, what do they do? Diet drugs. Essentially, diet drugs are meant to suppress appetite. They may not alleviate or they may not address appetite organically, but they suppress appetite directly, which would reduce the feeling of the hunger. Though the body is in need of the food, but due to this drugs, influence of the drugs on the body, body behavior, it suppresses that feeling of hunger, and in other words, it hides from your hypothalamus that body is in need of food, and doesn't make you realize that you're hungry, though you're actually hungry. Another drug, uh, so that may not be that may not be the organic way of dealing with hunger. That might result in binge eating again, and it might actually lead to some other harmful effects too, of which you can see right there, might result in increased. So in the process of suppression of hunger, suppression of appetite, it might result in increased heart rate, blood pressure, high blood pressure, creating in resulting in agitation in the mind, diarrhea, sleeplessness, kidney challenges, liver damage, and rectal bleeding. So such consequences might result in dire results. And those are some of the horrible consequences of eating less, or eating irregularly, or eating or resorting to various other various other tactics, like anorexia, as you see the image above. Anorexia is an eating disorder characterized by extreme self-imposed weight loss, at least 15% of individuals minimum normal weight. Some in fact go to the extent of 50% lesser than the normal weight, which is at some point they hit a point where there is no return, and it just becomes irreparable, right? Likewise, bulimia. What is bulimia? Bulimia is an eating disorder which is essentially characterized by recurrent episodes of binge eating, followed by attempts to purge the excess by means of vomiting or laxatives. The binge can be frequent and extreme. So, on the face of it, it might look fine. Okay, I'm eating, I'm vomiting, I'm eating, I'm vomiting. So, I'm just enjoying the taste, and then I'm bringing out. But then, what is happening during the consumption of these drugs that result in vomiting? Um, it is it may not be all well, right? This the consumption of these drugs, or the vomiting as a result of the consumption of drugs, use of laxatives, can disrupt the balance of potassium in the body, which can result in problems like dehydration, cardiac disorders, and urinary infections. So the point that drives home is body has its own natural mechanism to drive itself, motivate itself to its requirements, and let it go at its organic pace, organic methods, rather than pushing it to the wall. Okay, please answer the question before moving in to the next. And the next could be the socio-cultural causes. As you may have noted recently, there was this ad from this popular apparel maker H&M, wherein they are not even sparing the school kids. You know, they are portraying the uniform in as a fashion element, and instead of they are looking at school as a fashion ramp, school kids as the models, and the caption that this company has, instead of while advertising school uniforms for the kids to go back to school, The caption they chose was something like, "Make those heads turn in H&M's back to school fashion." How appropriate is that caption for schools and school uniforms and kids? So this kind of, these are the initiatives. These are some of the um, some of the unreasonable initiatives by the society, by the companies, brands, products, people, domestic households. Where the people are objectified. Objectification is what it all narrows down to. And so what happens as a result, and in fact, for that matter, you may check on Google, this ad had attracted a lot of backlash, and it compelled H&M to withdraw its ad and put it in the right fashion. So such perceptions, such practices lead to objectification, and the societal objectification, resulting in self-objectification or objectified body consciousness. We become so conscious of our own body that we put it to a lot of experiments, like we have seen, restrictive dieting, intermittent fasting, and then resulting in and resorting and falling to such ill conditions like anorexia or bulimia, etc. So greater body shame, greater anxiety, lower internal bodily awareness, reduced flow experiences from inside. The bodily fluids start receding, falling short. Eating disorders, resulting in eating disorders, depression, sexual dysfunction, and reduced cognitive performance. You may not be able to think normally as you're designed to think, because of these unorthodox and the socio-culturally induced pressures, stress on the individual. So these are the various factors that play a role in motivating, driving the behavior of an individual, that bears relevance to our discussion at this point. And in addition, of course, there could be some biological causes apart from social cultural. Biological, where somebody, by congenitally, by birth or by inheritance, genetically, they may be experiencing malfunctioned hypothalamus, which leads to anorexia, or a hormone called serotonin, which regulates the moods and hunger. A deficient secretion of this hormone called serotonin might result in bulimia. So those are a few factors that result in bodily disorders. Okay, before we close, you may please answer the question. That's the that's the lecture about motivation, and we'll meet shortly with another lecture in the series of lectures in psychology. Till then, see you all.